My name is Ben Varick, and I am the Outpost Program Director this summer. I'm sitting here at camp. I'm in the MLC office. The snow and ice are gone. The buds are coming out of the trees. The birds are singing. It's an exciting time here at camp. We're pretty jazzed for the summer to start. My role here at camp is to support the trip leaders and the trip groups any way that I can. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me this spring or summer. Email or call with any questions or thoughts you have. So the format of tonight will be about a 15-minute presentation about the Expo Canuck, and then some time at the end for questions. If at any point you want to ask questions, there's a little chat box. If you move your mouse to the top left, you should be able to send chats to me. Or you can unmute yourself and talk. We can have a conversation. This is great. So without further ado, I'm going to start this presentation. And if anyone's having technical difficulties or anything like that, also let me know as we go. All right. So this presentation has two sections. The first section is what you can expect when you get to camp, about your trip, etc. And the second section is how you can prepare in the next month before the next 2 months before your trip goes out. And then at the end, like I said, we'll have questions. So first things first, when you get to camp, that first day you'll arrive in the afternoon, and that first day, you'll be checking into camp and doing the swim challenge, having dinner in Nash, meeting your trip group, going over some expectations, and just settling into camp, moving your stuff into the cabin, and getting acquainted with your trip mates, perhaps for the first time. After that, you'll spend the next 3 days preparing for your trip at camp. And the most important part of that time, I think, is forming your trip group and starting to develop how you're going to work together as a trip group for the next 2 months. This is both facilitated. There's going to be a day of low and high ropes course facilitation to start practicing how you're going to work together as a trip group, as well as a half a day packing out your food, a half a day packing out your gear, some time on the water, both here on Boulder Lake and then whitewater training. We're going to go to a nearby river with your trip group and practice your whitewater paddling. And this whole time, as I said, is preparing some of the logistics for your trip, the gear and the food and whatnot, as well as starting to form how you're going to work together as a group. It's a pretty important time. Then you'll drive up to Points North. It's a 2.5-day drive. The first night you'll be sleeping on the bus that you're driving up. The second night you'll be camping at a campground. And then that third day, the start of that third day, you'll be dropping off the Canuck groups that you're driving up with, and then getting to Points North, which is an airstrip in northern Saskatchewan. From Points North, you'll fly in on a float plane to your starting point. Then, 45 days later, and we'll get to that part of the trip in a second, you'll arrive at Baker Lake and fly back to Winnipeg, where someone from camp will meet you and drive you back to camp. When you get back to camp, you're going to spend a day cleaning your gear, debriefing your trip. It's an important part of the transition from trail. And then on the second afternoon, your last afternoon at camp, we'll have a welcome paddle-in ceremony. This welcome paddle-in ceremony is for all of the Expo level trips. So you'll be paddling in with the Pacifics, the Expo Pacifics, while the Expo Alaskans are hiking in from South Bay, and everyone will converge on the waterfront steps. Where you'll meet your family, anyone that came, and there'll be it's time to share stories. There's dinner at Nash, and after dinner there's a slideshow of all the trips. It's a pretty incredible slideshow where you get to hear some wonderful stories. Hear about some crazy adventures. Please RSVP for this. Any guests that are going to come. so we know how many people are going to be in Nash that night. So the part that I skipped over, those 45 days in the middle, what is your trip like? This here is a picture of the Kazan River going over Kazan Falls. It's in Nunavut. You can tell the rivers up there are wild and big. No groups don't paddle this, you portage around it, but it shows some of the strength and power of these rivers. It's a pretty spectacular place. There are these huge rivers that you'll follow for weeks on end, more so than any other trip at camp. Well, you'll follow the same river as tributaries add to it, and it builds more and more water as it flows downstream. These rivers will open up into huge lakes. The Arctic tundra that you'll be traveling through is barren of trees in most places and has an incredible diversity of both plant and animal life. It's a really unique ecosystem that's pretty cool to have the opportunity to travel through. This trip is really remote, so risk management is key because of that remoteness. The key word for risk management is prevention. It's a lot easier to prevent injuries and incidents from happening than to try and fix them after the fact. Everyone in the group will be involved in risk management. The trip leaders certainly have a ton of experience and knowledge of the area, but the risk management is not coming only from them. Everyone is involved, and this is an opportunity to practice your risk management skills. The specific risks on this trip are, as I said, the remoteness. It's possible to go the whole time without seeing anybody, but perhaps the person who you get resupplied from, which is a pretty unique experience. The whitewater. This trip has larger whitewater than the Canuck, not in terms of technical difficulty necessarily, but in terms of the size of the waves and the size of the rivers. The travel to and from the trip, driving, is always one of the most dangerous things we do. We try and mitigate that as much as possible. The drive to your put-in to start your trip is done on a commercial bus with professional drivers, and the drive home is done with trained Manitowish staff members. And then there are a host of other smaller risks, weather, large lake travel, and everything that we can't imagine, which is why an important part of preventing incidents is awareness and developing your awareness and trying to travel in as conservative a way as possible. And this starts before the trip starts. This starts now. An injury that that occurs now, a rolled ankle, impacts your ability to do this trip in a few months. And so we ask that you start making conservative choices now. Your trip leaders. So your trip leaders, you should have received a letter from your trip leaders introducing themselves, and they may reach out to you again before the summer starts to include you and to kind of start the conversation about planning your trip early. These trip leaders have been hired for their experience. They both have extensive experience in both canoe tripping and paddling and backcountry travel, as well as facilitating social and emotional growth in groups, which is the mission of our organization. Both wonderful people. They go through a pretty extensive training before the summer starts. This includes certifications with the Wilderness Medical Associates. All of our trip leaders are Wilderness First Responders. Wilderness First Responder is a 9-day first aid course put on by WMA, Wilderness Medical Associates, that teaches our trip leaders how to administer first aid in the wilderness. They also go through an American Canoe Association Swiftwater Rescue course to learn how to do rescues in whitewater, as well as a lifeguarding and wilderness water safety course. Then, in addition to those, we do an 11-day Camp Manitowish specific training that we run here at camp. This 11-day is one of the most extensive in the industry, where we work on small group facilitation, risk management, technical, emotional, and social skills, collaborative leadership, and it culminates in a 5-day training trip, both to continue working on those skills and to foster discussions about trip leading in general. Your group. So your group will be traveling together and living together for the next, or for 45 days, which is a really incredible opportunity. It's rare to spend that amount of time in that close of a setting with that small of a group. And there will be harmony in your group at times where you're working together and everyone's in sync, and there will be disharmony, disequilibrium, where people are not getting along. And that's to be expected, and that's all right. It takes a lot of work to build a community that can work through those challenges. And so we ask that you come into this experience with an open mind and no expectations about your group. You may know some of these people from years past, but still, people can change a lot in a year, and we ask that you come with an open mind towards everyone. We also ask that you come in willing to put in a lot of work into your group. The more you are invested in building a good team, the better your group will work together. So this kind of is the second part of the presentation. Things that you can do to prepare in the next couple months before the summer. And one thing I want to talk about is gear, your own equipment that you bring to camp. Everyone should have received a recommended packing list from camp, and there are a couple items on there that I'd like to go over in a little more detail. The first is boots. So I like to think of boots as a couple of different categories of boots and shoes. First of all, there are wet boots that you're going to be wearing for most of the trip. While you're paddling, while you're portaging, while you're walking through rivers, these boots should have great ankle support. They should be really durable. They should give you good traction on slippery boulders next to rivers. And some people like to wear waterproof knee-high boots. There are a couple of specific boots that are mentioned on that form that are great for that. Those boots you're going to be limited and are quite important. The second type of shoe is dry shoes. It's important that they're comfortable. These are what you're going to be wearing in camp, and that they provide good enough ankle support so that in case something happens to your wet shoes, they can become your wet shoes in a pinch. In case your wet shoes break or they get lost or whatever, you have shoes that can work. So good enough ankle support and traction for that. Some people like to bring a third pair of shoes, pretty much just to dry out their feet. These shoes should be closed-toed and have an ankle strap. Crocs work really well for this. Something that you can sit in when you get to camp to let your feet dry and air out. The second piece of gear that I want to talk about is layering. Where you're going, it's going to be cold. It's been known. There's been known to be ice on some of the lakes that far north, and so we ask that you come prepared for that. Bringing insulation layers, fleeces, and puffy jackets, synthetic or down jackets are great, as well as a rain jacket, something that's waterproof and breathable, so you can wear it while you're portaging and working, and something that can fit over all of the other layers. Dry bags is something that I'm not sure is highlighted on that sheet, but I think is quite important. You can see here in the picture, there's a couple packs. Our packs are made out of canvas, and we do have a plastic liner bag inside of them, but that liner is not waterproof. Dry bags to hold your stuff is great. 20-liter dry bags work really well for your stuff. And I've also used dry stuff sacks, dry compression sacks for sleeping bags that work really well. There's a couple other things you can do to prepare for your trip. One is to physically prepare. It's going to be an arduous trip, and so any way that you can exercise, that you can break in your boots or practice any of the things that you're going to be doing on your trip is great, especially paddling. Any access that you have to boats or a lake or a pool and you can get on the water would be great. The second thing you can do is to mentally prepare. And so two things that I think are useful to think about before your trip are: what will you add to your group, and how do you hope to grow from this experience? you come to camp with clear thoughts on those 2 questions, I think you'll get a lot more out of the trip. That's the end of my presentation. I'd like to open it up now to any questions or thoughts or ideas that people might have. You can either click on the chat button and chat in any questions, or unmute yourself and talk, however you wish.
Hello.
Hi.
Question for you. What do you know the date of the paddle in? I'm trying to figure timing of some things.
Yes, for sure. Hold on one moment and let me look that up for you. So the paddle-in will be the afternoon and evening of August 10th.
All right. Perfect. And I had a question about the canoes. They're different canoes than I've seen. What kind of canoes are they? And there's obviously spray skirts and things like that on these boats.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the boats that we bring for the Expo Canuck are pack boats. They're boats that actually collapse. They're quite nifty. It allows us to fly trips in and out, so we can start the trips farther north than the roads go. It's a lot easier to bring in a collapsible boat onto an airplane than a full boat. Yeah. So the outsides are made from really thick vinyl, and then there are kind of thicker reinforced tent poles you can imagine along the side that provide the ribbing and the structure for the boats. And then there's spray skirts as well. The spray skirts are both for paddling to keep water out of the boat and for warmth, on cold days to bundle up and keep your lower body, everything that's under the spray skirt, warm.
Do you recommend we bring our own paddles?
That's up to you. We have Mohawks here, aluminum and plastic paddles. I like to paddle with a lighter weight wooden paddle, especially on longer trips, because it's a more efficient paddle, and so it lets me paddle farther. But it's good to bring both. So you can bring a wooden paddle, and then times when you're perhaps paddling whitewater, you don't want your paddle to break, you can use more durable plastic aluminum paddles that we have.
Do you recommend bent paddles or not?
Bent paddles? That's a personal preference. Some people love them, some people don't. I'd recommend paddling with it before you purchase one and you bring it on your trip. For whitewater, I'd recommend a straight shaft paddle. And so what I've done on trips is I've brought my own bent shaft paddle for flat water, and then whenever we've got into whitewater, I've switched to a Mohawk, an aluminum plastic paddle. Good question.
And the packing list is online as well, because I don't think I've gotten that in the mail.
Yes, the packing list is online. If you go to the website and you go under guides, it should be there, what to bring for Expo Canuck.
Any other questions, Manny? No. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And like I said, please email me or call me if you have any other questions as we get closer to the summer. We're pretty excited. We hope you are too.
I am.
We're very excited.
Wonderful.
Maddie will just be finishing school, actually. We have to move her exams to get her to camp on time.
Oh, wow.
So we're working on the logistics of getting her there, but she'll be there on the first day.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Have a great night.
All right. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.